Have you ever wanted to tap into the high-level players and extract the essential tips and tricks to get better at playing a Civ? Well, sit back and relax because I take on the challenge to do just that. Welcome to the Masterclass series. Let's do this. Hey YouTube, it's your boy Widgie here, coming at you with another masterclass. It's been a while and I have my good friend Guigs here. Is hopefully going to be able to provide you some really good knowledge. And this first one is going to be about the Dutch. But before we get into that, I thought I'd just hand it over to Guigs first, just to introduce himself and how he got into playing Age of Empires 3. How you doing, Guigs? You right?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic actually. Thank you for having me there. So for those who don't know me, I'm Guigs. Formerly named Le Castet. I'm 27-year-old from France, and I've been playing AoE3 since 2017 or so. I played a lot, obviously, during the ESOC patch days and early definitive edition as well. And then more recently, I've been helping ESOC community as a tournament admin. So I still play here and there to maintain a decent level, but I'm not as active as I used to be anymore.
Awesome, fantastic. So the first thing we're going to get into is one good general tip for anyone playing, no matter what level they are, that can help them play any kind of Civilization. And we'll do this before we get into the specific ones for Dutch. Okay,
so back then when I got introduced to multiplayer, I think the first blockade I reached was around First Lieutenant back then, which should be something around 1500 euro, I think, nowadays.
Yeah.
And so basically back then I was playing a lot of France and some semi-FF civs that requires good unit control usually. And I used to be like a micro tryhard one trick kinda. So I would usually like win fights against players my skill level, but eventually lose the game because I had really bad macro and I was not training wheels and I had wheels idle all the time. So
yeah,
a general tip that I give to like most people, and especially lower level and intermediate players, is to focus on your macro first. It's more important than fights. It's better to have a reinforcing batch of 10 units than killing 3 extra units due to good micro, and then you know like missing a batch or having half your economy idle at the same time.
Yeah, fantastic. No, as I say, that's one of the sort of key foundations. Is just, you know, to always be making villagers and make sure that, you know, you've got a batch ready training as you're going into a fight, so you have that reinforcing. So yeah, that's a really nice one. Okay, so going into Dutch then specific, what is your first tip for people playing the Dutch?
So Dutch, in my opinion, is very one-dimensional, and in like 80% of your matchup, you're going to be on a defensive back foot very early on. So I think your base building is really important. You usually want to use banks and markets, which are like big buildings with lot of HP.
Yeah.
And make a natural wall in front of your town center and covering your gold mine and your safe hunts with them. To make pathing and any aggressive attempts from your opponents to be as hard as possible to get in, and you know, this way you could trap potentially an army with a batch of cavalry or use Minutemen and kill a lot of units like that.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's very crucial. Like, you know, especially with there's been a few patch changes to the banks and stuff like that over you know, the last couple of years, but yeah, I think trying to make that natural wall is really crucial. Would you say trying to have a couple of like corridors like in your wall so you can sort of micro for certain battles as well, or do you think just a hard wall straight at the front, no way for the opponent to get in or anything like that? Is there any specific, would you recommend having like a corridor in there to try and help certain fights, or completely straight?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword because, you know, as we all know, like pathing is not the best thing about definitive edition. So it could backfire against you. Actually, you could not be able to get out of your base. So what you could do is like leave a gap and simply build a small wood segment. You know, like delete pillar or keep them. It's totally up to you with the new system. But you know, even just a 10 wood segment with the gate, and you know, like use skirmishers to get extra shots from it could be really nice. Because when you think about it, it's 50 wood. I mean, plus 10 wood for building it. And if you killed like one unit, it already paid off, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, fantastic. No, that clearly makes sense. Okay, so on to the second tip then for the Dutch. What have you got for us?
So after playing a lot of Dutch, I think their main weakness is the lack of good anti-cavalry in H2. And one of the trickiest thing, in my opinion, is Dutch is holding late H2 timings or early fortress pushes.
Yeah.
So yeah, usually 9 Reuters is what you want to be sending in most situations because you don't really have good anti-cav, and 9 Reuters is actually a lot of Dragoon type units that you can get with a single shipment.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like to follow this up with is usually Bosniaks, the mercenary shipment, because if you face an H2 timing, all your land wheels will be idle and your bank will still be gathering coin meanwhile. So you have the option to buy food to train standard units, or if you're in a situation where, you know, you have like 800, 900 or 1k coin stacked in the bank because you've been idle, then Bosniaks do extremely well versus H2 units.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Yeah, I do see some decks where, you know, Dutch players don't have any kind of Bosniaks in H3. So would you say, you know, especially if you're starting off or you're starting to improve with Dutch, would you always say that's a must to have that card in H3 just in case?
I really like that card just because that cav is very, very strong. 12 Swiss spikes used to be what people had before.
Yeah.
Which is also a decent option in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's just that fact that Dutch has such an easy time to collect coin, and having a good mercenary shipment is always helpful.
Awesome. All right. So the final tip then for Dutch players. What have you got?
This one is about raiding. Since you're the one who is defending most of the time, it's usually really nice to have 5 pesos or the amount you can afford to raid your opponent and idle his entire economy, because what happens is if you're being completely idle, you still have banks gathering for you, but if you're raiding your opponent and he is completely idle, he doesn't have anything working for him.
True.
Except if he's playing Inca or Japan or some specific civilization, but I'm talking more general other civilization.
Yeah.
So yeah, which is I don't know if I have footage about that, but when I was learning Dutch, I used to watch a lot of Lord Raphael gameplay because I think he's the best Dutch player that has ever played AoE 3, and he was making hussars in H2 most of the time, and raiding a lot with them, and it was really efficient.
Yeah, it's quite sort of unheard of, isn't it? Like, you know, for Dutch to make hussars generally. Generally the composition is like skirmisher, reiter and stuff like that, and you kind of just maybe get some pike as well potentially. But yeah, like being able to raid, as you said, is really, really good, because even if you're in a spot of trouble yourself, you still have the banks collecting yourself coin. So yeah, you can be in a pretty favorable position. So no,
exactly, and it forces opponent to send units back, or he's gonna get weaker batches because of that, and that helps you in the long run for sure.
No, it's awesome. That's fantastic. Moving on to the next bit then. So this is a kind of fun sort of meme build, maybe that you've done recently in the past. It's not going to have amazing success rate maybe, but when you just want to have a bit of fun, is there your favorite kind of build order that you do?
Yeah, I got like 2 in mind. I think they are a bit memey, but they can be viable in some situation. So the first one is going to be the fast industrial with the church guard. The idea is to get the stadhouders, or more recently called blue guards, I think, the 30 muskets.
Yeah.
From the church, and to follow that up with 2 heavy cannons and have a very powerful timing with that. Yeah, I think this build can work as a surprise, you know, versus passive civilization that like to fast vultures.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's also pretty easy to do. I mean, you do a normal Dutch opening, and when you reach fortress, you just simply gather only food and they let your bank gather for industrial. You age up with 1k coin and send the church guards in transition, build the church, and you gather your coin crates, and you have the blue guards ready, basically.
Yeah, I think it can definitely work. Maybe like, especially if you're potentially queuing and you're in quick search, for example, and you're coming across that same opponent, they're probably going to expect the same sort of thing from you. So I think maybe in that instance, if you do something completely off ball, like just complete curveball, that can really surprise, maybe an opponent that you play quite a lot, it can probably actually be quite beneficial. So
yeah, for sure. I think it's viable in Dutch mirrors. It's viable versus passive civilization that like to boom, like Japan, maybe for example, that could work as some kind of cheese. Or just definitely. As a surprise effect overall.
Yeah, nice, awesome. Okay, so a little bit more serious. I think a lot of people are probably going to be able to answer this question, but I'm going to definitely be asking it anyway. But what is the kind of, at the moment, the standard meta kind of build order for Dutch? Obviously, there's going to be a few variations maybe, but what overall is the main thing that you go for when you're trying to, improve on the ladder?
So with Dutch, you almost always want to age with 15 villagers in H1. And then you are going to gather food and wood in transition for a bank and make a second bank with your 400 wood age up. And your first shipment is going to be 700 wood most of the time, or a bank wagon if you want to deal with early pressure. And then what you want to do from here depends on your open civilization or what's going on in the game. You can have more banks, like get the third and ship the bank wagon to follow up. Or you can have the military building, train hussars, train skirmisher, train pikemen. You have a lot of options from there.
Yeah. So like with the choice of 700 wood or a bank in Age 2, would you go for the 700 wood if you're going to expect some pressure in Age 2, or would you go for the bank? How would you sort of make that decision first, the minute you get into Age 2?
I think if you go bank wagon first, you would like to start stable. I think it's synergize really well with each other. And if you face early pressure like Russia, for example, 5 costs like 5 musketeers, you want to town center fire the Russian musketeers and use your hussars to deal with the Cossacks.
Yeah.
But you could also go for 700 wood first. Even if you expect pressure, it's just going to be a bit harder to defend Alien because you won't have a military building.
Yeah. No, of course. No, that's, I understand that. That's fine. Fantastic. Well, that sort of wraps that up. Quite straightforward. As you mentioned at the start, Dutch can seem sort of quite one-dimensional. But I think with its coin gathering, its banks offers some interesting things with certain mercenary cards as well, like you mentioned with the Bosniaks. And of course, that good old blue guard kind of play can be quite interesting as well if you want to pull that off. But no, I really appreciate it. All I can say is thank you so much, Guigs, for coming on and sharing your knowledge on Dutch. Hopefully a lot of people out there watching will take some of your advice on board and will definitely improve. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hope so. Thanks for having me, and see you next time, I guess.
Cheers.